Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NorthStar Community, our online and in-person service. So glad to be here. For NorthStar, what our goal is for us to really understand what drives us to live with addiction and to think addictively. And so if we have the premise that addiction is habitual behavior to avoid pain, so we think if that's the case, then we need to go and find out all the things that's causing our pain in our lives that create such a need for us to live in addiction. So we've been talking about in the last few weeks about toxic shame. And again, there's shame, and we need shame in our lives. That keeps us from doing things over and over again that harms others and ourselves. But toxic shame is quite destructive because there we create this theory that we are a mistake, that we are not okay as we are, and it's really hard to live with. And for many of us, that's what we do. So as we look at addiction through the eyes of NorthStar, we break it into three categories. We have our substances, and I think everybody understands that one. When I talk to people about I work in recovery, I work with addiction, they always give me a story about an uncle and aunt or a cousin or a nephew or brother or whoever that abuses alcohol and all that. And of course, what I always immediately think after that is, well, then probably because of all that, you probably have some compulsive behaviors yourself, and called codependency. So again, our three addictions are substances, compulsive behaviors, and addicted to people, or what we call codependency. They're all pervasive. A lot of times we do more than one of those. A lot of times we do all three of them. Just depends on who we are and what our life story is. But the fact is that, again, if we think about it from habitual behavior to avoid pain, it really makes sense for the things we do, both mentally, emotionally, physically, all those things, to keep from just experiencing the pain in our lives. And so toxic shame just tells us that we're not valuable. It tells us we're not enough, or it tells us, how dare you even think about being successful. At best, we're going to let you be mediocre. And a lot of times, we are our own worst critic. We are so tough on ourselves. Like in NorthStar meetings, we'll talk about how, we'll talk about all the things we do wrong, but yet we'll be so forgiving and loving to other people. I mean, and that's a beautiful thing, but we also need to be forgiving and loving to ourselves. And just imagine for a moment a world where you're quietly confident, you're living in the present moment. You really aren't feeling much anxiety. You trust that God is there and has a plan, and so you don't really fear the future, and you just, you're connected and you're attentive to people important to you, and you see other people hurting, and you're there to pray for them and be there for them. That's what we're after. But so often when we're addicted, we don't have time to think much about anybody but ourselves, and in those times, not very positive how we see things. So I was thinking, I'm going to pick on myself for a second. I really struggle with social anxiety at times, and social anxiety is I can say this since I say do it, it's such a silly thing to have, but boy, can it take over sometimes. So I just got done, I flew from here to Colorado Springs and Colorado Springs back to here last 3 days, and so flying is just such an example of toxic shame for me. I get so worked up about all the stuff I got to do. Now, once I get through security, I love flying. When I get through there, I am just fine. But before that, my social anxiety is so high. I worry about everything. I think I got to be there 20 hours before the flight. And all these, I've never missed a flight. And always about, oh my gosh, the stuff I think. And I'm worried about people behind me. I'm worried about the agents in front of me, and all these things, and my hand's almost shaking to put the credit card in to pay for my luggage and blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking about, I like to pick on myself some. I think it's a sign I'm healthier than I used to be. But one of the things, I will never, ever check a bag that I got to put up into the holding area. It's never going to happen. I spent $70 for, I gave United $70 this week because I refuse to put my bag up above because I see all the people that struggle with it. I see the sheer terror in their eyes sometimes when they know the entire plane's waiting on them to get theirs out, and they're sitting there trying to pull it out. I'm like, never going to happen. That's social anxiety right there. And it's silly, but it's what it is. So it just, I was thinking, flying's such a funny thing. I don't know if you're like me, but I worry about, there's so many unwritten rules about flying, right? Like, you stand up, you wait for a person in front of you to go out, right? The guy sitting beside me yesterday obviously decided that wasn't a rule for him, and he took off and went down in front of people still trying to get their bags out and everything else. And that annoyed me. So that's an unwritten rule, or we know which side of the terminal to walk on. And if you ever look, if you were to go back and look at all the luggage, you can see how luggage changes over years, where it goes from this to that and then they all look the same. You still can't find yours, right? Well, it's on the carousel because they all look the same. So there's all these things. And you know what? We'll never see those people again, probably ever. Though it's kind of funny, I was just talking to Eric, our music director, and he just told me we were on the same flight Thursday morning. He didn't see me until I walked by him, and I didn't see him till I didn't see him at all. So because my social anxiety was probably too high, and I was, worrying about doing anything right. But that's not a good way to live. If I had to live like that every day, I would absolutely be exhausted. I would be angry. I'd be resentful. I would never know connection. All I'd be doing is I would be living my life, making sure that I followed every rule, every unspoken rule. I'd be doing everything perfect all the time. And we know that isn't true. It's not possible. But I would guess a lot of us out here can understand that. When we're with recovery, I'll get to this in a second, but with recovery, most of us have experienced trauma and abandonment at some level, some of us very high levels, and that takes away our ability to see ourselves in positive light. But I want to real quick cover again the tenets of NorthStar. We see things. So again, we see addiction in 3 types. You could break it in all sorts of ways, but substance abuse, if I'm drinking too much alcohol, or if I'm using heroin, or if I'm on cocaine, or smoking marijuana 6 times a day, I've got a problem. Right, my life's impacted by it. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm hurting and I don't want to face my pain. Compulsive behaviors, this is a large category. The one that I think really is emerging that's caused lots of problems for us is the social media. I mean, we have people now who are addicted to likes on Facebook or whatever it is on the others. We get caught up. We spend hours on stuff online. Average teenager today is averaging 6.2 hours a day on digital form, some form of digital. It's becoming a very big issue. It's causing a lot of the anxiety and depression we have. And I'm not going to get all that today. It's coming, though. But depression is 50% higher today than it was in 1990 in the United States. That is not a coincidence. And then of course, we get addicted to people, where we either think we have to give ourselves up or we have to control everybody around us to be loved. Neither one of those work very well. So, addiction is a no-fault disease, but it is a disease. We believe in the medical model, not the moral model. You can talk about willpower all day. We'll talk about it a little bit today. Willpower doesn't work. You have to see addiction as a disease. Our addiction asks us to cling to safety and security, not to live our lives fully. It can create us a world of stress, anxiety, anger, envy. It does momentarily resolve our pain with something, someone, or some behaviors, and we use self-deception to keep us going. So today I want to talk about control over not being controlled. How's that sound? So the question for us is, why is having control over not being controlled so important to us? Or being concerned about being controlling so important to us? And this was a little bit hard to understand, but it is important. So here I am. Here's a kind of a symbolic example of it. So I say to myself, smoking is killing me. I need to quit smoking. I'm going to start today. Wait a minute. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. Nobody can tell me what to do. That would be us being controlling and being fear of control and being fearful of being controlling. Think of the times that we we get in relationships and we give ourselves up so they'll love us and they'll like us, and we try to do everything perfect. I know this is hard to hear sometimes, but that is controlling. You are being very controlling there because you're trying to not be you. You don't think you're worthy of being you, and no one would love you, so you do everything in your power to help them to see you in this ultimate positive light. It's very controlling to do that. Or I've seen the other way where we love to get in relationships with broken wings, people with broken wings, and we're going to come in, we're going to fix them, we're going to save them, we're going to love them to health. You hear the control there, and it doesn't work. Controlling and either because what happens is then you get into resisting being controlled, and you resist being controlling, and that makes it very hard to love people. And that's why I was saying, if I behave like I do pre-security at the airport, I am not loving, I am controlling, I'm worried about myself, I'm overly focused on me, and it doesn't work. But the idea, of course, is all of our addictive thinking and behavior is based on the idea of taking away our pain and getting through today. So I always love to read this. I got this from Patrick Carnes' book. I kind of changed it, but from his book, Out of the Shadows. He wrote it about sexual addiction, but I will tell you, you could read that book, and it's just good about addiction, actually. But this is a perfect example of how our controlling, living our lives, either being controlling or resist being controlled, creates so much problems in our life. So this is a very confusing way of looking at things, but as addicts, we know we look at the world very confusing. I've never had an addict tell me this is not accurate. I assume abandonment from those that love me due to my addictive behaviors. Because I assume abandonment, I will do everything I can to alienate the people around me. I hate what I am doing. I hate being addicted, but I cannot stop. I am consumed by my addictive behaviors, and I will do everything to keep them alive. I live with bravado and look like I have everything under control, and I need no one. But in reality, I live in absolute fear of being alone and losing those that love me. The healthy people in my life who actually love and care about me, I try to hurt because I know eventually they will leave me. So I'm just going to get it over with. Since I assume abandonment, I will do everything I can to hurt and alienate those that love me. Yet, abandonment is the last thing I want, but my addictions are stronger. How's that for confusing? But it really fits when we get addicted, our toxic shame so high, we loathe ourselves. That's what people have to understand. And for people that don't have the substance addictions particularly, but really it fits in all of them, it's easier for me to live addicted with all the chaos, with all the destruction, than to face my pain. That's what's important here. And so you can ask yourself, well, what? Come on, right? But for us online, I'm going to assume all of us online are sitting here, we're in recovery. We know exactly what I'm talking about. Abandonment and trauma are the common denominators in most people who are addicted. Now, I think all of us have had trauma and abandonment in our lives at some level. But for a lot of us in recovery, we've had so much hurt, so much heartache, so much pain, so much just abandonment in our lives. And it takes away our foundation. It takes away our ability to know who we really are. So I'm going to read Isaiah 54 here real quick. Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. For your Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. The Lord will call you back. That is such a beautiful scripture for us to remember. I know some of us out here, we've been hurt by what we would call religious people, people who mean well, all those things, but just don't turn God into us. God is much greater than us. He loves us. The whole point of that scripture is he's not keeping score. He doesn't care about your past. All he cares about is now. And he loves you, and he wants you to trust him and to give yourself to him. He is always there for you. It's what we decide to do with our side of that's the problem. I'm going to look at Luke 7 real fast, too. So this is a story about Jesus gets invited to Simon's house, who's a Pharisee. Now, the purpose of the meal is to catch Jesus and to try to trap him, because the Pharisees are obviously not wild about him, and he's a threat to them, and he has created a lot of issues for them because he's really challenging their hypocrisy and all those things. So he goes to this meal. He's sitting there. Nobody's being nice to him. Nobody's really greeted him. Well, along comes the harlot, the woman. Some people have a theory this was the woman who, in John 8, when Jesus basically saves her life, when they're all going to stone her, and he tells the first one without a sin, throw the stone. So there's some theory it's the same woman. We don't really know that. But she comes into the house through all the people who are glaring at her and judging her. And think about the courage of something like that, to walk into a room, because she hates herself. She loathes herself. She's broken. But it's her brokenness that gets her to do this. So she comes in. She starts weeping. She kisses his feet. She wipes his feet with her hair from the tears on her face. So she finally has broken. She's finally hit the rock bottom she needed, and she knows where to go. She goes to Jesus in a very hostile environment. How about you? That's pretty courageous. So Jesus is with her. Everybody's grumbling. They're all saying things like, well, if he knew who she was, he wouldn't be talking to her. No, that's exactly who he wants to talk to. That's why all you out there, again, Jesus is there. He loves you. He's safe. He wants you to come back to him. So then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, who's the Pharisee, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, have not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. He didn't say, you've lived badly and I don't know if I want to see you again. He didn't say that. He said, your faith has saved you. And so you can see a lot of stuff here. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you have the Pharisees who are addicted to power. Their compulsive behaviors is about wealth and money and power and judgment. They're so addicted. Their hearts are hardened, and their power is that. That's their addictions is what put Christ to death, because he challenged their addictions. And we don't do well when people challenge our addictions when we're not ready yet. On the other hand, you have a woman who comes in broken, facing her pain, feeling the sorrow, courageously walks into a hostile environment because she knows Jesus is there. So I hope we can see this. And here's the point about trauma and abandonment. We can't undo it. It's you hear me say this all the time. I continue to say this, is I don't really care about your childhood, but I do care about how your childhood is affecting you today. That's what's important. So it isn't about, we're not blaming or making excuses. I hate to tell you, but if you're sitting here listening, you're an adult. And so you got to take care of this. You're responsible for this. But it doesn't mean I'm not empathetic and sorrowful for some of your lives, because I know some of your lives have been mind-bogglingly tough, right? So this is about us validating how your childhood impacts you today. It's a way of helping us put perspective into our hurt and our pain. And really, I know a lot of people get mad at me at first, but once you get through recovery, you go, yeah, you're right. It's when we can take our trauma and our abandonment and turn it into a gift is when we've made recovery work for our lives. Think about the trauma and abandonment. It creates low self-image. We at best, we consider ourselves mediocre. I coach athletes, some really good ones. I've seen some really good physical athletes not be able to get past mediocre because they didn't think they deserved it. They didn't think it was okay for them. And you look back in their lives, you can see why. Or we have a slow decay within where we just create a campaign of anti-us or anti-me. And we attack ourselves over and over. And then, of course, we get to the never enough. So it robs us, trauma and abandonment robs us of our feelings of being in charge. And addictive thinking then comes in, and it keeps us from recovering from those haunting, painful, life-changing events because you can't do it on your own. You need support to do that. How many of us have over and over felt the one where we say, you know what, I just felt different as a kid. I felt like I was different from everyone else. Well, that's because for us, we had trauma and abandonment in our lives, and our brains created pathways and short circuits, and we were hiding, we were doing all these things. So about 2/3 of respondents to the ACE with adverse childhood, I'm going to talk about the adverse childhood experiences survey. I think it's just such a powerful tool, and I use it all the time in NorthStar. The fact, about 2/3 of respondents in America have responded, at least scored 1 on the ACE. But here's some statistics. 1 in 3 marriages will have at least one physical or sexual abuse incident. 1 in 4 girls will face attempted sexual assault before the age of 18. Some would argue 1 in 3 on that. 77% of obese women have been sexually assaulted. 1.8 million cases per year of childhood sexual abuse is reported, and I will tell you that is way underreported. So the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, looks at 3 things, really. It looks at what kind of abuse did you face, what kind of household challenges, and household challenges would be you observed maybe your mother being hit as a child, or you didn't have enough food, or someone in your house was incarcerated. And then, of course, then neglect, too. So I want to make my point about how accurate I think this is. So 12.5% of the people who have taken the ACE scored 4 or more out of 10, right? So the higher your score, the more abuse, household challenges, and neglect you faced. So in NorthStar, I would tell you that I'm going to say that the last, I usually kind of try to count this, but I'm going to say if I were to take an average, I would say about 75% of the NorthStar community has scored a 6 or more. So it's not a coincidence that they're coming. I'm so grateful because without intervention, this is the most important statistic, I think, just to tell you how important trauma and abandonment is in our lives. Without intervention, people who score 6 or more on the ACE will on average die 20 years younger than someone who scores 0 on the ACE. I mean, that is a powerful, and symbolic, and accurate, and whatever else you want to put it, statistic about how trauma and abandonment wrecks our lives. And I say without intervention, it wrecks our lives. And it makes sense. So I live my life with anger or with fear or with sadness. I go out and I drive too fast. I get in too many fights. I abuse alcohol and drugs. I mean, I don't have the statistic right in front of me, but if you score 6 or more, the chance of you being a substance abuser is like mind-bogglingly high. It's like, I can't remember what it is, 10 times higher than somebody who scores a 0. And one of the things I always try to tell people is, you know, what we're talking about here is post-traumatic stress disorder, and for a lot of us, the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, where we as children, we were in an abusive environment, but not only were we in an abusive environment, we were in an abusive environment we could not get away from. So we were immobilized. That's what creates the issues. We lost our sense of power. We lost our sense of us being a self-actualized individual person with my dreams, my goals. We lost all that. We lost it all to survival, and we're still living that as we become adults. So without intervention, we're going to die younger and more violent. You know, the top 2 deaths now, you know what those are for people in their 30s and 40s is alcohol and drug abuse and violence. So if that didn't tell you something, our society we're violent, and our addictions are growing, and I hope we can find ways to get some of this down. Of course, places like NorthStar, we're doing our best. So when I've gone through trauma and abandonment, when I face things that are not okay, and I always, when I talk to people individually, I always talk about, to hear you talk, how you normalize things, how you kind of assume everybody goes through that. It's just not, that's not what it is. One of my, I shouldn't say favorite story, that's always the wrong way, but it's one of my more powerful stories. I was talking to someone who talked about every night, just about every night, their mother was so caught up in alcoholism that she would just pass out. They'd be at the table eating, and she would just pass out. Either she'd fall forward, and her face would hit the food, or she'd fall back out of her chair. And she said, you know what? After a while, we didn't even stop talking. We just went, look, there's Mom again. And when her mom was sober, she would tell him, well, your friend Julie's house, they do the same thing. And she grew up believing that. And, of course, as children, what we do is we blame ourselves when we see our parents in this much pain. We go, well, it must be us. Something's wrong with me, then my mom can't quit drinking. And that's the part we oftentimes forget. So this controlling and resisting control, the power struggle begins because we don't want to face our pain. So we set rigid rules about ourselves, and we got to be perfect in every way, and if we're not perfect, no one will love us. Or you know what, I'm never going to be perfect, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to act out, I'm going to get bad grades, I'm going to cause problems, I'm going to find other people are miserable because that's the only people that I can hang with. And anybody successful, they're all bad, they're all wrong. You see the rigid rules we set? And what we do is we're doing all this to keep us safe. We want to be emotionally safe. So I think this is a great symbolic question. Do I have to give up me to be loved by God? And you know what everybody says that are addicted is yes. But the answer is no. You don't do anything. God loves you right now. You don't do a thing for God to love you. But you hear it because what we're worried about is giving up control. Oh my gosh, if I become a Christian, that means I got to live perfectly, and I got to do everything right, and I got to give up all the stuff I like to do. And it's kind of scary to think about not living with all that stuff I do. In fact, it's very scary. And I'm going to try it. Or we're going to go, I'm done, I'm not going to do it again. It's apparent to me that I'm on Facebook too much, I'm on social media too much. I'm going to stop right now because I'm never going to do it again. Well, I need to go on there and check something, right? And then, well, I need to look at some other things. So you get the point. It doesn't work. But the thought of giving ourselves up to God and being controlled by some outside force is quite terrifying. And let's be honest, a lot of us had some pretty bad role models on that. Either we had parents who lived hypocritically, expected us to live perfectly while they were abusing and doing all their addictive behaviors. Or they might even blame God for that, or we had people that just really were not very nice to us who were in the church. So we have to remember, God is not all that. God loves us. But giving up control may trigger fears in us of, oh my gosh, the last time we had control, all sorts of bad things happen. But isn't it funny, we can't really come to know God if we can't let go. So the answer again is, do I have to give myself up for God to love me? No, God's already there. He already loves you. Do you need to give yourself up to get better? Yes, you do. So it's a little bit tough, right? But let's think about it. But make sure we hear this. Our parents did the best they could, and our parents influenced the way we see God. And it affects the way we see God. But the fact is, God is above all that. And our parents really did. I don't care how bad they were. For you that are parents and you're beating yourself up right now, maybe for stuff you did to your kids, stop. It doesn't do anybody any good. All you can do is get now, in the present. If you're in recovery, I assume you are if you're listening to me, that's all you got to do. You don't worry about the past. It'll take care of itself. Your kids will come back. They'll see you better. The biggest gift you can give to anybody is get healthier yourself. Not because you control them. It's just that you respond more healthily to them. And think about it. If I'm spending my energy on getting healthy as opposed to controlling, don't you think the world's going to be a little better? And if I can love myself enough to let go of my perfectionism and my need for external validation and my need to do all those crazy hurts, habits, and hang-ups behaviors, we might actually have a decent life. Be pretty crazy, wouldn't it? But we always talk about it all the time. We talk about the rich, full, meaningful life. You cannot have a rich, full, meaningful life if you're busy resisting and controlling and hanging on to that addictive stuff. So I always think the great example, this is the porcupine index that Dr. Tversky talks about. And the porcupine index is, I have my quills out. I'm not going to let anybody get close to me because I've been hurt too much. The trauma and abandonment of my life would warrant that. It's a lot of people have hurt me, and a lot of people I should have been able to trust have harmed me. But so the porcupine index says, I'm going to let you see me. You can see me smiling some. You can see me friendly. But you're not going to get to know me. My quills are out, right? So the healthier we get, hopefully, the shorter the quills get. So the problem with porcupine index is it keeps me safe. You're not going to hurt me much because you're not ever going to get to know me very well. I'm not going to tell you any of my secrets and the stuff I'm doing that's not okay right now. I'm not going to tell you about all the time I'm spending drinking or the 33rd relationship I'm in that I shouldn't be in and I know I shouldn't. But I'm not going to tell you about it, right? Because you're going to tell me I'm being dumb, right? All that stuff. So, but the problem is with the porcupine index is that we will always be lonely and we will always be sad. And you know what? It really is true. If you cannot allow yourself to be hurt, you're never going to know what it's like to be loved. So this is I always say this to people, and I always say it with humor, but it actually is very important, is, you know what? You're not so bad. Or maybe I can say it as, we're not so bad. This is so important for us because of our resistance to allowing ourselves to have a rich, full, meaningful life, to letting go of all this resistance we have about being controlled by others and being controlling to others. That's a lot of energy we're spending on nothing, because that's what it really is. Now, I'm not saying you just go out there and throw yourself at everybody and tell them your life and all that stuff. I had people do that. I mean, good Lord, I was on a plane this week and heard someone talk about his childhood abuse. I'm like, whoa, okay, I don't know you, but okay. But the point is, we can have a rich, full, meaningful life when we finally accept the fact that we're not so bad, and it's okay. We're not perfect. We're not going to do everything right. And if I live my life in protection mode, in hiding mode, in dishonest mode, all those things, I'm not going to have time to figure out what my purpose is in life. I'm not going to have time to figure out what I need to be doing. And I certainly am not going to take risks. I'm not going to go out there and put myself out there and fail, because then everybody will see what a failure I am. People see what a fool I am. You know, we got to figure out ways to get past that. When I'm at the airport, so what if I'm a little slow, and so what if I don't get down the right line? It's okay, but not in my moment. I think it's the worst thing ever. And oh my gosh, I'm failing the entire world. The United Airlines is going to close down because I didn't get in the right line, right? That's where we get to sometimes. But think about it. How exciting would it be to discover I'm not perfect and never will be, and what a challenge it is to live life completely and fully. Enjoy being a failure at times. Enjoy being successful at times. Learning to live and to figure out ways to live without being perfect and needing all this external validation, to see trauma as a gift. I know it was hard, but you know what? We cannot turn the clock back. I wish I could. For a lot of you who have had traumatic experiences in your life, I've had them too. You know what? Can't turn the clock back. Can't. Wish I could, but I can't. So the only thing I can do is figure out a way to turn that into a gift. And you know what? If you do it with gratitude, you can eventually. Because you know what? If you've been through trauma, God's going to put you out there in front of someone else who's going through trauma, and you're going to be there for them. I hear those stories over and over and over. And so really the answer to all this is, how do we overcome this? Is safety is the answer. Connecting with the right people, the right times, who know what you're going through. I think it's called reciprocity is probably the best way to say it. Reciprocity is that I get as much from someone as they give to me. A lot of us in our lives have never experienced that one. Either we've been harmed by people we should not have been harmed by, or our porcupine indexes are so strong and so our quills are out so much that you're never, ever going to let people in. Well, that's not safe. But you got to be smart about it. You got to let people in. You got to connect with the right people And, of course, support groups like NorthStar are so important because people in there, I don't think you're going to shock anybody in there by your story because their stories are fairly shocking too. But they're moving forward. They even see, I've had a couple of them talk about how having knowledge of the ACE has made their lives better because now they realize they're not alone. They realize it makes sense to some of the stuff that they experienced. We always talk about, the 3 rules about getting healthy, and that is you have to get healthy people in your life. I always keep reminding everybody this. Rule number 1 is get healthy people in your life. Again, people care about you, what's best for you. If that doesn't work, try rule number 2, get healthy people in your life. If those first 2 rules don't work, try number 3, get healthy people in your life. You cannot do it without that. You cannot possibly overcome toxic shame by yourself because your internal committee will tell you how awful you are all the time. And we have to be able to hear feedback when we do this. So I invite you to come to NorthStar if you're here locally. If you are not local, find support groups out there. Find groups that are there to hear you so you can overcome your trauma and abandonment. I tell you, I think as a society, we're making a lot of progress on this now. We're much more attuned to understanding this than we used to be. And once you can face that, you can let go of a lot of this resistance that we try so hard to do with ourselves. So I'm going to close with a quote here. We did not come to this planet to protect against failure. We came to fully and joyfully manifest ourselves, offering our love, gifts and talents to each other and the planet. When you practice faith in God, develop your true self, and connect with other healthy people, then you are free to neither comply nor resist. You are free to do whatever is in your highest good. And your highest good is highest good for the rest of us. So, again, we meet NorthStar Community. I appreciate all of you joining us today. We meet on Fridays at 6:30 up front here if you would want to come join us. We provide you a full meal. You don't have to go home. You can just come here. You don't have to change clothes. You're good. We don't care if you're casual, you're dressed up. We don't care. But full meal, it's always really good. It's a great time to connect. And it's a safe place. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to be any of that. You're just going to be supported because we're all there for that. We also meet on Wednesdays at 6:30, same place. And then we also have our Sunday morning at 9:30 Sunday school or small group, and then, of course, 11:15 online service. So anyway, I appreciate all you coming, and please feel free to contact me. You'll see it on our website. And we always close the NorthStar community meeting with prayer of serenity, and so I'd like to do that today. So let's go ahead and pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Again, thanks for joining us. Have a good week.